Welcome to my podcast, Not Just CAD. My name is Sean Bryant, and I'm an Autodesk Expert Elite who loves CAD, BIM, technology, and loads of other not just CAD stuff. Not Just CAD is the social media outlet of CAD FM consultants, and you can check out the Not Just CAD blog at www.cadfmconsult.com. Today, our guest is the incredible Laura Jane Clark. And she's a prolific architect running Lamp Architects and is a well known face on UK television, starring on Your Home Made Perfect on BBC Two and Netflix, and Ugly House to Lovely House on Channel 4. Other TV appearances include George Clark's Amazing Spaces and Shed of the Year. And on top of that, in that 25th hour in each day, she's managed to write a book called The Handbook of Home Design, an Architect's Blueprint for Shaping Your Home. Laura, thank you for joining me today and giving up your valuable time. We're all so busy nowadays, and I know you have a lot going on, especially with your Glasgow house renovation and other architectural commitments as well. In your own words, could you give our listeners a quick breakdown of who you are, where you're from, and obviously include the country for the international listeners, and give us your elevator pitch of kind of what you do and your kind of breakdown of what you do as a person.
Okay, so I'm an architect, as you quite rightly put out. I was actually born in Scotland, but then grew up in North Wales, and then have come back to Scotland via Dublin in Ireland and London, obviously in England. And I have, well, funnily enough, I always wanted to be a surgeon. Um, you say elevator pitch, this is going to be a long elevator. This is going up like the Empire State Building.
That's fine.
So I always wanted to be a surgeon. And then I kind of realized when I was like 15, 16, actually, I just wanted to be like my dad because my dad he was a surgeon. He used to take me on emergency runs. I'd used to go on blue light thingies with him. And but I kind of realized that I just wanted to be him. I didn't actually want to be a doctor. And it was quite handy because I didn't get the A levels to get into medicine anyway. But I remember going to a Charles Rennie Mackintosh exhibition and seeing these sketchbooks, and it was just like this kind of explosion in my head. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be an architect. There was no architects in our family. There was nobody really knew anything about it. So I kind of went from wanting to do a 5-year university course to a 7-year university course. And it was like, okay. So I think as an architect, I've always felt very inferior. And in school, I felt in architecture school, I was the one crying in the toilets most of the time, not getting great crits, not really understanding a roof. I remember I was like, so how does a roof work? And I'm like, what? So I think I've always struggled with architecture. Loved it. But always had a kind of like disconnect with not being this kind of professional horn-rimmed glasses kind of architect with a roll neck jumper.
Don't
Um,
forget the bow tie as well.
and the
Architects
bow
always used
tie,
to wear bow
exactly.
ties, didn't they? Remember?
But I love construction. So I used to work on building sites. So in my university holidays, I'd work on a construction site and I would, I literally go and ask if I could be a labourer. So I was getting paid like £6 an hour or something as labourer, but it was the most informative time I've ever spent. And I'm convinced if I can ever do anything, I want all architects training to get some site experience. Because I think it really, for want of a better word, like grounds you in architecture and construction and gives you that respect for builders that I think is really important. So for me, my elevator pitch as an architect comes from all of that background. It comes from loving construction, and I really want to be the kind of architect that loves builders, that works with builders. I think everybody's work is better when it's a little bit more collaborative. Yeah, sometimes there's points where you go, no, I don't think you're right. I think it'll work this way. Um, I love housing. I love working with people. Um, and being told as an architecture student, first day in uni, that if you end up building kitchen extensions, then you failed as an architect. And I've basically made my entire living out of kitchen extensions. Then I think just having this real issue with the uh, vidality, not that's not the right word. Uh,
Validity, is that the one you're looking
Validity, that's it,
for?
of my profession has been really tricky. So fast forward to lockdown, funnily enough, um, and I was doing the show, the first series of Your Home Made Perfect. Obviously, I'd done stuff with George Clark before, and that all came from the back of uh, finding some derelict underground toilets and converting them into a flat. So I'd done TV a little bit. I kind of fell into that, and then I was asked about Your Home Made Perfect, and it was this. The concept of it was brilliant. It was home design, but it was kind of talking about design and decisions and how those decisions will impact all through 3D. And I was like, actually, this sounds incredible. So we filmed it. It was really intense. We kind of did all 16 projects in about 15, 16 months, including all the planning applications because the person we were working with couldn't quite do it. I did all the building control drawings. I did absolutely everything. It was insane. But when it then came out in lockdown, it was this huge, the biggest validation I've ever had, because I think people were in their homes going, "Our houses don't work for us, extensions don't work for us," all this stuff that I've been saying for years and years and years and years, how important it is. Suddenly people are like, yeah, house design is really important. And a 30 grand extension is just as important as a 30 million pound tower block. So I think in a nutshell, I'm all about the democratization. I'm saying all these words and I can't even
That's
say.
it. Democratization. That's the one. You
Yeah,
got it.
and I think design should be for everyone, and I think that has always been my goal in life, and now I can really kind of feel that. And so writing my book, it was all about giving that kind of power, that ideas, the process of design to everybody, to empower everyone to go, do you know what? I can design. It's a really intuitive thing, and it makes me very excited. It's about making space work for you. And that's what I think is my goal in life.
Yeah, I
Can you
think
tell I've
that's
just had a
about.
coffee?
No, no, that's fine. No, no, no. I totally agree with you. I mean, I started as a civil and structural engineering technician back in the day, and my career path, it has changed dramatically. And I now love what I do. I'm recording AutoCAD courses for LinkedIn Learning. I'm an Autodesk certified instructor, Autodesk certified professional. I'm also what they call an Autodesk expert elite. And there's about, what I think it's about 400 of us worldwide. And I never thought I'd be where I am now, where I've realized that career satisfaction for me is partnering with people such as yourself and getting that message out there and, empowering people. And I know you'll always be an architect at heart. And I'm really curious, what made you make that move into television? Were you approached, or was it like a light bulb moment where you thought to yourself, if I do this, I'm going to be able to get my message out there better and quicker?
It was a wee combination of both. It was a coincidence. So I'd found these old derelict underground toilets in Crystal Palace like 7 years before. I knew that they were really special. I knew that they could be this amazing space. There was no cinema at the time, and I was like, oh, it could be like this kind of art cinema and like community space, art gallery, blah blah blah. Um, and it was really early on, so it was like 2004. So I'd kind of just qualified, had no money, no experience at all. Um, but these toilets were just like constantly there. So I was basically spent 7 years trying to persuade the council to sell them to me. Is a very long story, but eventually they said yes. So, and then obviously I turned around and said, I'm going to make them into a flat and live underground. And they were like, I think she's crazy. But I got planning, got building control, and started building them. And I remember doing it, and they were completely derelict. They were just amazing. The ceilings were like 2.8 meters high. It was skylights above. So the whole place was flooded with light. But I mean, they'd not been touched since 1986. Even there was like an old coffee cup that the last person that, the last toilet attendant had obviously kind of left and just left their coffee there. It was still, had oh my goodness, it was just rancid. Um, so I remember doing it thinking, like, this is actually quite an interesting project. And I got in touch with Grand Designs, and they were like, yeah, it's interesting, but it's a wee bit too small. And then I think I approached George for Renovation Man, and he was like, "Yeah, it's too big," or no, they didn't want to do it for Renovation Man. Um, But they were doing this new project called micro designs, and they're like, yeah, it's too big for micro designs. I'm like, right, fine, okay, I just left it. But then the producer of what then became Amazing Spaces got in touch with me because she used to live in Crystal Palace. And I was like, oh, I had approached you a wee while ago. And they're like, do you know what? We're changing. It's not micro designs anymore. It's Amazing Spaces. And this fits. So I had already done it. And I remember meeting George for the first time and him being like really cross because he was like, this would have been brilliant in Renovation Man. I was like, I know. A Restoration Man. I was like, I know. So like I say, it already been finished, but it was on the first episode of the first series. And now I think it's on like series 326. Um,
Yeah, our Skybox is on record all the time with just about everything that you and George do because we just watch them back.
Not
You know,
her again.
well, no,
Um,
it's more a case of, on TV right now, it's like, "Oh, there's nothing on, is there? Oh, watch another Your Home Made Perfect. Let's watch it again like this." And, I love watching them, and one of the other things that really intrigued me, especially on Your Home Made Perfect, and obviously we've had a bit of communication, via Instagram and so on about what software was used for Your Home Made Perfect. Because as soon as I saw all the virtual reality stuff, I was like, "Oh, this is interesting," because that's really my bag. I'm a total techie geek, and I love all that stuff. I've got a virtual reality headset sitting under the desk actually, that I dabble with and so on. And basically, it encouraged me to go out and buy the book, your book, and
oh, fab.
it was like, do you know what? I saw it advertised, and I thought I'm going to get it, and it's a great read. And for me, it takes the reader into that literally back of an envelope kind of idea, all the way to the realization of having, like you say, that extension, that extra story on the house or whatever. And it even what I love about it is you take them through all the hurdles, the planning permission and all that kind of stuff, which a lot of people I think probably look at all of that and think, don't want to do that. I'm a bit scared of that, and I'm not sure about it. And what I love about the entire book though is it really resonated with me because I started out on a drawing board, and
Me
I
too.
was, yeah, 18 years old. I was on the board in this big petrochemical company. And I always remember working with a fantastic guy called Eric, who was on the drawing board next to me. He's probably not with us anymore, bless him, because he must have been in his 60s when I was 18, so he can't be around now. If he is, he must be very old. But what one thing stuck with me that he told me, he said, because I'm a real perfectionist when it comes to drawings, they have to be just so. And I think that's why I ended up as a CAD manager and so on. And he said, they don't have to be the Mona Lisa. They've only got to read them. And it stuck with me and it made me realize how to optimize my design on any drawing that I did. And but the book goes into all those drafting principles and getting your lines straight and your dimensions right and so on. And they're the foundation of everything. Well laid drawings are better for communicating your design intent. There's no two ways about it. They don't have to look all, singing or dancing, but they need to be functional and optimized so that people can just pick it up and go, that's that, that's that. And well laid out drawings are obviously better for that. But based on your book, I noticed a lot of the time you're still with the pen and the paper, which I am too. I will often sit and sketch something out before I put it anywhere near CAD. And do you find that method more effective to get your design processes going before you commit to CAD? Does that work for you as well? Is that the workflow you use?
Absolutely. And I think I have always used pen and paper. And like you, I started on the drawing board. And in fact, for my third year, I broke my arm playing football and I had a cast on my right hand. So I had
Oh
to
no.
tape my point 0.8, point 0.5, and point 0.3 on my fingers and like finish drawing like that. Um, but I think, and similar, this, I use the same pen weights and CAD that I do, that I've always done. For me, the kind of it's almost like the speed from my brain to my hand is so much quicker with pen. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
what
I
is
agree.
lovely about it is you can make mistakes. And, I have literally I've been doing initial consultations since 2016, 17. Oh no, before then, 2012, 13. And I've got every single sheet of A3 tracing paper I have used since then, that
Wow.
literally over a meter high. Um, and I think it's especially bringing the book as in to the people and kind of saying, this is how you start design. This is how you start to look at things. This is how you can measure your space. This is how you can start drawing over. I think doing that pen to paper seems so much more intuitive than doing it with CAD. And I can sit occasionally, I've gone, oh, let's just see if I can just draw this on CAD. I've got an idea in my head. I say, and I just can't do it. I just can't do it. It loses that kind of flow. It loses that, looseness. So, most people can draw with a piece of paper and pen and start to put their ideas down. So it was really important to me that all the drawings were hand drawn. So every single drawing in that book, apart from the elevations, which are CAD, which I drew as well, I drew everything. They're all my own photographs, bar like 3 or 4. They're all my own work. We've either built it ourselves or we've done it with clients and I've run the jobs. And like I say, everything was hand drawn. So I had CAD drawings that I then drew over by hand, or not very neat drawings that I redrew. And it took, when I finished, it was like an extra 2 weeks of work to draw everything. But it was one of the most lovely kind of cathartic things I've ever done. And looking through the book now, just going, oh yeah, and just get it, like you're saying, getting that simplicity, trying to make everything simple for the reader so they go like, oh right, yeah, oh no, it's really easy. Because I think architects are kind of very cloak and dagger, and it's just like, oh, you wouldn't understand, you only live in your house, you can't possibly design one. But I think I really hate that, and that's what I've put up with the whole of my life. I'll walk into the RIBA and they'll be like, who are you? And I hate that. I absolutely hate it. And it's just giving people that knowledge. So yeah, pen and paper is the most effective
Yeah, it,
tool.
it humanizes things, and I'm with you as well. That I mean, I've worked for various architectural practices over the years, ranging from contract CAD draftee all the way. I was a Revit practice coordinator for Farrell's in London for a little while, and there is like you say, a sort of secret society thing almost going on sometimes, and I want to see that humanized because there's so many people out there that they'll look at their house. I mean, it's like this house we live in. I mean, we're in East Yorkshire, about a mile off the coast, and the house was originally a 1930s bungalow. It's been built up. We've got a second floor, and we've got an extension at the back that's been put on, and we've got lovely outbuildings that we're converting, and we've got a reasonable sized garden and everything else. But I looked at it when we first sort of viewed the property, and it was like I was walking around going, change that, change that. I want to do that there. I want to do that there. And Michelle, my wife, she just said to me, she said, "This is the house we're going to buy, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah," because because in my head I could see everything where we wanted it to go and how we wanted it to work.
That's so interesting. I'm completely the opposite. I could walk around anywhere and have literally no clue whatsoever. As soon as I've got the plan in front of me, then I'm like, I'm so plan based. And I think that's one of the reasons that the book came about. When I moved my initial consultations to Zoom, because obviously couldn't go anywhere. And I'd been thinking about doing it online for a while because I was getting requests from like Cornwall and all over this place. And with a young child, it was just getting impossible.
Yeah,
Um, and so I was like, right, well, let's try it. So, and it worked really well. And I think as long as I've got the existing plans, loads of photographs, and then obviously can see where the sun comes, I can see all that kind of stuff. Then the most important thing is the conversation with the homeowner. But I am so plan based, and I have never in nearly a decade, I've never done the same design twice, even if identical house. I've done 3 houses on the same road in Watford, which just is a
wow,
complete coincidence. I've never done the same design twice. There's one that was like, oh, we can have an exposed beam here, and I was like, oh, that was similar similar to that other one. Because every house is so different and everybody needs something different. Maybe they've got a
yeah,
dog, maybe they've got, small family or a big family, downsizing, upsizing, where the sun comes round, maybe a bit of wind, they could be identical mirrored houses, and you wouldn't do the same design. So the methodology was coming really, really clear to me. And I was like, oh, there's a book in this. And I was getting really excited and obviously did some webinars. So yeah, I can walk around any house And people are like, "Oh, what would you do?" And I'm like, "I don't know." But give me a plan, and I'm like, but I still
That's
see it
really
in
good to hear, though,
3D.
because we do all work differently. And I think that's what makes our particular industry quite exciting, because I know that I would approach a project in a totally different way to you. And that's partially due to our backgrounds. I'm one of these people that kind of goes, "Yep, need an RSJ there," and so on. And I'll pick out those bits. I mean, I'm the sort of guy that was working in the drawing office, 5 o'clock on a Friday when all the drawings needed to go out, and an architect such as yourself would come along and go, "Can you just move that window along by about 500 millimeters?" And it'd be like, "I'd love to," but then you'd see the steel column. "Oh, can you
Yeah.
move the column with the window?" And it's like, "No,
Yeah.
because the building will fall down."
So
And
you say
it's
architects such as yourself, I would have never have said that. I would have known
I know, but I
that.
have worked with architects like that, unfortunately, as well. But again, it's horses for courses. Everybody works in different ways. Now, I'm an Autodesk expert elite, as I mentioned earlier, and I specialize in AutoCAD and Revit as well, Autodesk Revit. And I'm really lucky. I've been using AutoCAD now for over 35 years, been around the block a bit, as we discussed earlier, and I've worked in architecture, engineering, construction. I've worked in lots. Like you, I've worked in kind of different areas. So I've got that nice, as you said earlier, a grounding. I haven't just specialized in one thing. And some of your viewers and your readers wouldn't haven't had the luxury of the expertise that our careers have given us. So your book comprehensively covers all of those concepts and ideas and takes them through, creating the plan, interpreting the plan, finalizing the plan as well. And what I loved about the book was you had all your finishes and your details, your suppliers, and I'm thinking that's what people need, because I'm really bad. I'll sit there on TikTok and I'm flicking through and I'm looking for all different finishes and so on. And Instagram's another one for that as well, where I'm looking, oh, I love that finish. Go to the website, check this out. And of course, in your book, there's an entire section on how to find all this stuff. Because sometimes when you're doing a project like that, it's really hard. You're trying to source things. And I mean, the pandemic for me was a real eye opener for me, because we had two things. Well, I say three things that happened. Michelle and myself, we both had really, really bad COVID. I was actually hospitalized,
Oh my
and
goodness.
yeah, I decided to go and get blood clots all in my lungs, which was loads of fun.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, and then our lovely landlord, we lived in Norfolk originally. He decided to sell up during the pandemic, and that's what encouraged us to buy a property. And we kind of sat there and made this criteria list. Do we want a new build? Do we want a house that somebody's done up to a point where we can add to it? Or do we want a blank canvas? And that was where we ended up with. I mean, this house is functional that we're in, but pretty much I want to change every room because I can see the potential of every room. And every room in this house is pretty basic. And I'm a big IKEA fan. I love all the IKEA hacks as well, because you can get some really, really cool finishes. And that's another one I've got God knows how many IKEA hack videos saved on TikTok, ready for when we do all the finishes in the house. But what the book obviously gives the readers that breakdown of the process. But I mean, if you wanted to start, say, a learning program for them, what would you teach them? What would you start with and then build upon? If you had somebody that hasn't got the benefits of our expertise and our experience, how would you kind of point them in the right direction? Where would you start them, and what pointers would you give?
Learning CAD or learning architecture?
Bit of both, really, to be honest.
Eh, I think I think it's about sketching. It's about not being afraid to make mistakes. And I think, on a day-to-day but I mean, I could point my camera down and there's hundreds of sheets of paper all over the floor. Because there are, I think it's to make something look simple and complete, which is what you know, strive for, whether that's in a drawing, as you say, so it's really legible, or in a design, you kind of want people to go, why was it not done in that like this in the first place? And oh, that must have been so quick because it's so simple. But actually, that simplicity is hours and hours and hours and hours of sketching and resketching and, making everything line up completely. So it's kind of interesting. You talk about, the IKEA hacks and things like that. Uh, and I do a lot of building myself and lots of building stuff myself. And even the projects I did, initial consultations and all the original projects I did, because I was starting out on my own, they were all fairly small projects. So I was kind of cutting my teeth on 50 grand loft extensions or 35 grand rear extensions. And the stuff we were doing, we never had masses of money and still don't. So, we'll put a kit, the kitchen, the gold kitchen, the brass kitchen we have downstairs was 1,200 quid all in, but it looks amazing. Paint anything black and it looks amazing. And having I think there's maybe a kind of myth that you need a lot of money to be a designer or you need a lot of money to kind of mess around doing stuff. But actually, finding the cheapest way to do things is really helpful. So, like I say, all the pictures in my book are stuff that I've done. They're under, everything we ever build is like under 10 grand or under 20 grand. Um, and as a full renovation, not a
Hmm.
single piece of furniture. So I think it's kind of experimenting and making little models. You don't need to buy something if you're wanting to start thinking about kind of furniture design or IKEA hacks. Kind of just start messing around with bits of material and go to a timber merchant or go to Jewson's and go, oh, maybe this would be really nice. And it's a really cheap version of something, Farrow and Ball or not Farrow and Ball. You know what I mean? Like you get
No, I get you.
marble.
I
Or,
get you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're kind of
Yeah.
looking for different alternatives. So that's what I would say. And then in terms of actual architecture and learning architecture, read my book. That's where you start.
Well, no, I agree with you on that one as well because I mean I sat there. Well, as Michelle will verify, I had my head buried in your book for a good 3 or 4 nights. She was watching stuff on the TV and just she was asking me questions and it would be like, what? So I was busy reading. But I think I mean I've been training on I've been training on AutoCAD now since 2001 when I set up the business. And it's what I'm finding now is we have we have two generations now almost where they want everything to be instantaneous and it has to be right now, and it's getting them to like you say with the sketching, it's getting them to kind of take that breath, take that step back and go, you're going to start here, and then I want you to slowly make that transition to there and realize your design. And I mean, I can always remember when I did my first AutoCAD course. Wow, way too many years ago. And my boss came and sat next to me while I was doing some AutoCAD work, who'd paid for the course. And his name was Peter Skidmore, and he was the principal engineer. And he sat there sort of just on my right shoulder for about 10 minutes. And I'm like 18, 19 at this point, and he's like, big boss man of the entire, 100 people department. And I'm getting more and more nervous as I'm sitting there with him on my shoulder. And I just said, Peter, can I help you? And he went, how are you getting on with the AutoCAD? And I said, it's great. I'm really enjoying it. And he said, so how long does it take to generate a drawing in CAD? Is it quicker?
Mhm.
And I think, and he
Right.
was of that mindset, that it was going to revolutionize. And he said, what? You mean you don't press enter on the keyboard and the drawing just comes out? And I was like, no. And I sat there with him for a good 45 minutes, just showing him all the sort of little things like move, copy, rotate that on a drawing board would have taken you hours. And yet in something like AutoCAD or Revit, they're like seconds now. And weirdly enough, I mean, I spent a long time in that company and I ended up being the CAD manager of like 25, 26 people. And Peter realized the concept. He totally got it once I'd explained it to him. And I think there's a lot of conceptual stuff that people have to understand as well, because there is a workflow to every piece of design. And Architecture is one of those where obviously you go from the planning stage with the planning permission all the way up to construction, or stage 6, I think it's still called now. And it's getting that methodology across to people, I think, and getting people to understand. And the book does that brilliantly. That's what I loved about the book. I was thinking, if only I could, well, I doubt you'd give me free copies, but for every course I taught, if I could say, here's a book by Laura, this will teach you everything you need to know about design. And it's kind of getting that workflow across to people. And
No, I totally agree. And funnily enough, because I suppose in my head, working in 2D is very old fashioned. And I will draw stuff, and I've started doing this little kind of design series on Instagram, just kind of like how to look at stairs and da, 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 and I'll do lots of like wee little bits like that. And on the one hand, I'm kind of going, oh, I should really be doing it in 3D da, 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 to engage the public. And I'm like, well, when you build, you start in 2D. You start with a layout, you lay your walls out, So, and I think there's this kind of, especially in terms of students, I've done tutoring, I haven't done it for ages, but for, doing tutoring for first year and second year students, and they come up with these like amazing 3D models, and my mind's just like, what? And it looks really convincing. You're like, oh, right, okay, yeah. So you thought that, well, I mean, that could be built tomorrow. And then you start to break it down, and you're like, yeah, but there's no entrance and there's no exit. Do you know what I mean? And then kind of, and I think that you're right, it's the fundamentals, and
yeah,
those fundamentals are 2D, and the actual process of design has to start in 2D
yeah,
because that's how you build. So, yeah, it's a kind of interesting one, and I miss the boat on 3D. I can do it very, very vaguely. In fact, I taught myself CAD very badly, and I work with, another architect and a few technicians, and they look at my drawings and like, "These are the CAD drawings of a mad person." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I taught myself." I'm very, very fast, but I'm similar to you. The drawings have to look really beautiful, and I'm really ashamed to say that my insulation, I still do it by hand because I just hate the insulation, block. I just hate it so much.
oh yeah, yeah, no,
So I know that I need to kind of, like,
I mean, Autodesk Revit is a wonderful tool. I think it's amazing. It's like Xbox for architects. It's marvelous, and I love using it because for me, I can take my 2D CAD drawing, import it into Revit, and I've got like this flat piece of paper, and I'm building the walls and the doors and the openings off of it. It's marvelous. I love watching that happen. That workflow, that process is amazing. But I'm totally with you on the 2D side of things, but also the interpretation. I do a LinkedIn live stream with another LinkedIn author friend of mine, a chap called Jim Rogers, who's based over in Arizona, and he's in construction over in the States. And one of the things that we both so agree on is we need to get the construction people up to speed with CAD, but we also need to get the CAD people up to speed with construction so we can all talk to each other. And it will save so much rework on site where they'll get a drawing and the construction guys will just laugh
mhm.
and they'll go, "You want us to build that? Really?" And it happens. And, and people go, "Oh, it's fantastic design." But like you say, where's the entrance? Where's the
Mm.
exit kind of idea? So
I
you,
remember
you,
one of the guys that I worked with, so when I was like 18, 17, 18, and I was in North Wales. I'm not going to do the North Wales accent, but this guy was like, just remember, a block is 200 and whatever mil. A brick is this size. When you're drawing your lines, just remember that. How hard it is to build a straight, a
yeah,
vertical plumb wall at 500 mil when you're using 420 mil blocks. And you're like,
yeah,
oh, yeah. And that has always stayed with me.
yeah,
And he was one of the nicest. He was one of the digger drivers and let me drivers dig around. It was amazing. And the last thing he ever said to me was, "Don't go changing," which is really lovely. And I've not. Um, but yeah, I think so we're talking about 2D. When I draw in 2D, I'm thinking in 3D. So I'm
yeah,
thinking in
likewise.
section.
Yeah,
So And then when I do consultations, I'll draw in section. But it is still quite, you know, conceptual for some people to kind of understand. And I think if I would have had the time, or if I'd have started a wee bit later and been in Revit time, that I would have had the time to kind of start doing my own modeling as quick as I can draw, then yeah, being able to show pulling walls up and showing somebody in 3D, I think that would be absolute game changer. But I'm kind of, it's one of those things, you know, I'm a massive skier. I've skied since I was 8. I love the way snowboarders come to, and I'm like, there's no way on God's green earth I'm going to give up the small amount of time I ever get to go skiing in Scotland to try and relearn something. And it's the same with cat, you know, I just don't have the time to
Exactly,
relearn
exactly.
something.
Yeah,
So the
it's
technicians I
one of
work
those
with, they're
things.
like, and I'm like, yay.
Yeah. No, no, I totally get that. Now, something else that I wanted to talk to you about, again, talking about the book a bit and, encouraging homeowners to change their homes and refurbish their homes. I'm obviously I'm doing that here with the house in East Yorkshire right now, and it's not easy. There's a lot you have to think about. I mean, we've just designed this great big long island in our kitchen, and I had to get the electrician out 3 times because I suddenly realized that if I needed to put a back panel underneath a breakfast bar, the socket boxes were sticking out too far. And I had to get him to reset all of that. And also the other thing where the wiring was coming up through the floor for the hob, it was in the I had measured it all out and said I need it there. And then when the island top went on, it was like, oh, the hob isn't central. We're going to have to move the wire. And it's little things like that that you have to kind of think about and rework and refit and so on. It's a journey, and you mentioned George Clark earlier, and again, I hold George in as high regard as you when it comes to how you design, and more importantly, your philosophy of how design happens and how important it is. And he's got a brilliant quote that I love, and it really stuck with me when I first started watching him on TV. A home is a container of dreams, childhood memories, and life experiences. It's a very personal place that reflects you and your way of life. And I think that for me, it sums up how a home should be. The house is the bricks and mortar, the glazing, the roof, etc. But if you want to make your house a home, you've got to go through that journey, that design journey. And it's very organic. So obviously, I follow you on Instagram. I've seen the Glasgow home, and it looks fabulous. By the way, I'm really impressed with it. It looks amazing. Um, but it is organic. What sort of qualities do you look for in a home rather than a house? And do you want them to be organic or more contemporary? Or do you follow inspirations from other architects, for example, like, Lloyd Wright or whoever, Eames maybe, all that kind of design stuff. And do you try and make that container, the home, personal or more contemporary? What are your thoughts on that? What are your personal likes and dislikes?
It's a kind of interesting question. I think I've only ever lived in a rented home, and then I was one of the last self-certified mortgages before the financial crash. So I was incredibly, incredibly lucky to get a house in Southeast London before it was impossible. But there's no way, even now, I would struggle to get a mortgage
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
single self-employed woman. Um, and so I was incredibly lucky to get on the housing market then, and then I got but it was, it was it was an old house, but it was a Victorian house, but it was very magnolia. Obviously, painted everything white, did a kind of slightly crazy kitchen, was always into just doing something a wee bit different. Um, and then bought the toilets. And I think I'm very much led by the house itself, by the fabric of the building itself. So I would do a very different design, say in this place that was kind of Georgian wreck when it still had all the kind of, you know, tattered curtains hanging down. You know, it was literally they left the key in the door and walked away. So it was derelict for 5 years, but it was obviously a very kind of like posh, you know, house. And then Clifford Street that we did in Glasgow, one before this, was, you know, I just in my head, it was like, it's all gonna be white, had amazing cornices and all that kind of stuff, but it's all gonna be white, timber floor, boom, that's it. And then one of the rooms had the kind of the main room that overlooked the M8, it was very, very cheap, had this kind of peach velour wallpaper. So we scraped that off, and underneath it was the original red painted plaster from the Victorian times with the stenciling
Wow.
on. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing." And that's when I got kind of deep into really dark colors and really experimenting. So I would say for me, I like very dark colors, but I think it's come from the house itself. So I would never try and impose a really kind of simplistic John Powson-y kind of Lena Bobardi, really simpleness on a kind of mad Georgian place or a mad Victorian place. So and I my husband's also colorblind, so all he can see is red, and it's his favorite color. So I think I don't really have a style. I would say dark, and I've experimented with, you know, bright colors and, you know, but it just doesn't work. And weirdly, I was writing a piece for Reclaim. I do a column for Reclaim magazine. And one of the things about my architectural inspiration, and I was kind of like blah 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 blah. And then I suddenly we were in France when I was writing it, in the south of France when I was writing it. And I kind of jokingly was like, "Oh, really posh French hotels are my kind of inspiration." But then the more I broke it down, I was like, actually, it's the light in, you know, like Italy and these kind of faded. I love texture. My phone is full of pictures of bricks and concrete and old, like dodgy old wall or a fence or something. I'm all about texture and like the feel and the kind of look of stuff. So actually, I love that kind of like faded stone or faded brick and, you know, really kind of Mediterranean faded colors. So I think that's where I'm most comfortable. And it was actually writing that article that was like, oh, actually, it's true. This is my kind of inspiration.
Yeah.
And maybe that comes from, you know, being a Celt and living on the the northwest coast of England and Scotland and
Could
Wales and
be.
just being
Could be.
freezing cold my whole childhood. You know, that is where I gravitate to the south of Italy. So that is my architectural style, but it definitely comes from the environment. So if I was to build something, if we were to design something, say in the garden and build a little kind of pod, it would look like Lena Bobardi because she's one of my favorite architects. Um, but I would never impose that here. Do you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah, no.
definitely
So you're doing it almost in keeping with the receptacle that you're in,
yes.
basically.
A house is a
Yeah.
receptacle. Love that.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's a receptacle of everything, isn't it? It's got the people. As George said with his quote, you know, it's your memories. It's a personal thing as well. And it's like our kitchen is very modern. We've gone for a very modern. It's all very grey and shiny. All the units, and we've got this amazing composite laminate worktops, and they look like distressed metal with rust on. And the contrast between them is marvelous. And I've got Michelle to blame for that because she chose all of that. But you know, I'm just the guy with the little DeWalt saw cutting the holes for the, you know, the hob and the sink and everything else. Um, but but yeah, it's finding the right contrast. And you talked about dark colors. And one of the things we had when we moved in here, again, the room I'm in is magnolia, and our lounge was very magnolia. And we've got a beautiful, obviously, it's an old 1930s bungalow. So it's got a lovely old fireplace with a wood burner in it. And it was all just painted magnolia. And the bit around the wood burner was white. And you just had this big old black, you know, wood burner in there. And I thought, we need to change the color of that. It just doesn't look right. So we started using, I don't know if you've heard of it, French chic paint,
Yeah.
the chalk based stuff. And
Mm.
there's one color that they have, it's called smudge, and it is the most beautiful dark gray. So we did the entire chimney column in dark gray and looked at it and thought, I think we need to do the whole lounge in this. And we realized that going, like you say, going to those darker colors, if it's in keeping with the rest of the room, so we have a white leather sofa, I thought contrast there is going to be amazing. So
Yeah,
you, I think
and
you're
I was just
quite
gonna
right with that
doing the
in keeping.
yeah, and doing the show, I think because I did do quite a bit of interiory stuff to a point with my clients, but then doing the show, obviously having 16 projects that you needed to, if for the first series 1 and 2, that you needed as a full interior design scheme. And I remember we'd go back and forth, and Robert was like, "It just needs to be white model, white model, white model." And the producers are like, "No, it has to be a full scheme because people won't get engaged looking at a white model because it's not a show for architects, it's a show for homeowners, um, or renters." And so building these schemes fully designed, full interior, I think because I've never done any form of formal interior training. Um, and I got kind of more and more adventurous as I went on, and that kind of mirrored the stuff, the rooms that I was decorating in my home, I'd get more and more adventurous. I remember the one for Christine and Dennis down in Margate, and it was one of my favorite ones. And it was she hated my project. She absolutely hated it. And it was the big blue entrance hall and the paneling and everything.
Remember it?
And he was
Yes.
like obsessed with like nautical stuff. So in my design, I was like, I had like stuffed seagulls in the sea. I just went like totally mental because by the time you get to pay, like, because that was like the 14th or 15th project, and I was literally going, I was like, just get some taxidermy in there. I want taxidermy everywhere. And I had this phone call from one of the execs, and they were like, "You can't have taxidermy on the BBC." I'm like, "Ugh." um, but yeah, and I think it was a great way to really experiment. And I basically only use, in fact, I've got one here. I only use Dulux Heritage
Okay.
because, and I've not been, I've tried to be sponsored by them. I've tried for years to get some kind of, but they won't have it. But I started using their really early heritage range. I think it was called Bowler Hat, which again was a really, really nice dark grey for Clifford Street. Um, but they're the only ones that do a lovely red, the really lovely blues, and they just every single color they do, and the Raven's Flight, which is that really almost black, it's just beautiful. So even and I think one thing with Instagram and people kind of going, "Oh, where do I start?" It's like actually, if you have a fairly not limited because the heritage range isn't limited, but if you know what you like color wise, then it's a really good place to start. And having a kind of limited palette, because you go to B&Q and you're like looking at and you're just like,
Yeah.
where do you start? And also it's about tone. I remember we painted our bathroom blue, and we just bought a cheap one from from B&Q. And it looked like a ranger's bathroom, and it was like, it's just, and then we used the midnight teal from Heritage, and it was literally almost imperceptible, the change in color. And it just changed absolutely everything. And it went from this really kind of like gaudy, like, oh, football, bathroom to this really elegant, beautiful space. So I think, yeah, finding colors that really work for you. And again, I've been to clients when they've literally got 100 different thingies on the wall, all very, very slight different, going, "Oh, we like this color, we like that color." And it's like, it it just makes the whole process so tricky. So, yeah, I would kind of always start. I literally every single other design I've done is based on Dulux Heritage, and then you kind of work out from that. And it just gives you like this kind of really solid that that all the colors in there that you really, really love, and then they work with everything, and they've got the kind of a neutrality and a kind of depth to them, and you can get mixed up. So they're not actually 50 quid for a pot of paint. You just get it mixed
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
your
Paint is
Drake
now
counter.
expensive. I agree with you. I know
Yeah.
about that one.
Yeah, I've never actually bought an actual pot of Dulux Heritage.
So you're talking about obviously painting your bathroom and everything. You've got your incredible house near Glasgow now. Have you finished it? Are you done now?
What is this word finished? I have no concept of this. It's livable. So, oh, it's more than livable. It's fabulous. But I think so there were rooms that we got ready, like the loo, because it was kind of the flat before was bucket flush for ages, but we didn't have our daughter. So when we moved here, we had one working shower and one toilet. So that was good. But all the drainage, because we did pretty much everything ourselves. We had to the dry rot was obviously taken care of professionally, and the drainage we worked with a plumber that we've worked with for years, who's wonderful, but thinks I'm completely insane. Um, and we'd kind of put our hands under these drains and there'd be like huge holes and we're just like, what? So we've kind of taught ourselves everything. My husband makes lots of furniture and light fittings and things, so we kind of make everything ourselves. And I think I found that I'm always kind of, so like the bathroom that we got, so we had to work in loo, and there's literally loo in a basin. I'm now like, right, I think we should mirror that completely. At the moment it's just green, it's got loads of photographs up. I'm like, let's mirror it, so I've always got these ideas. And just the other day, I'm like, I want to make a kind of haberdasher's cupboard for under 500 quid using IKEA stuff, IKEA hack kind of stuff.
Sure.
So it's always, I've always, and my husband's exactly the same. So I don't think anything will be ever finished, but we're doing upstairs in the attic. We've got these kind of, it's quite a low attic, and my kind of husband's his little space. um we have all the fabric there ready to go. We've got the design, we've got all the detailing, how we're going to do it, and the whole thing is going to be red velvet cake, like
Wow.
cloaked in red velvet. So kind of doing things that are like more adventurous interiors wise, I find really, really exciting. But actually that's come from a really practical thing, because when we were doing the basement, sorry, I'm jumping around all over the shop here.
No, no, you go
um
for it. Jump
yeah,
away.
when we were doing the basement, that was basically our workshop. So it was, it's like all our tools were down there. I mean, it was literally dank and horrible. But the house had had all its floors covered in concrete. All the lime render had been placed with concrete in the 60s, and it was all plastered. And all the paintwork around the around the corbels and the coins on the end, everything was really cheaply done. So all the sandstone was completely encased, completely soaking wet. So that's why we had dry rot, and they hadn't fixed the gutter. So there was loads of dry rot in the house. And everything was just so damp. I mean, the ambient temperature here in kind of spring was like 7 degrees.
Wow.
So we had to literally dry it out from the inside, because you couldn't, moisture couldn't escape from the outside. I scraped all the paint off. And we just had to literally let it dry out for a couple of years. And in fact, a photographer came in, because it was a really famous house, because it's involved in a big case, and the guys can like used to be related to Camilla and all that stuff. Still didn't fix his gutters. Um, and somebody actually came in to the house and took pictures of the house, and I had the windowsills covered with rubble sacks, because we were
Mhm.
just trying to work out where all this water was coming in from. And without £100,000 in the bank to get somebody else to do it, we were doing everything ourselves. So we're like, where's this drip coming in? And then you'd like locate it, and what water's like, it comes in everywhere. So we had polythene over all the windowsills. I chipped off all the paint by hand with a cherry picker, letting it dry out because it'd been done so badly and so cheaply. And so this photograph went up in the local press and the local Facebook page. And everyone was like, who are these people coming in? And we had a really cheap car, and we'd smashed the window because we were like using it to cut it. I was standing on top of this car with a chainsaw, and they were like, it smashed the window. So we'd like, my husband had welded this plate on the back of the car. So, I mean, it did look really kind of, you know, encampment like. And but I was so angry, and I wrote to the paper and I was like, you remove this photograph. We are doing everything by hand. We've not applied for any grants. We've not applied for anything. We are literally doing it with our own money in our own time, with a small child and 2 full-time jobs. So give us a break. But I think things like that get me really, really cross. Anyway, I digress. The whole house was completely sopping wet. So in the basement was the worst. So I didn't want to put plaster on top of stonework, because again, it's just, it's the same problem, and then we wanted to put lime on it. So we've put lime plaster anywhere that we've taken the original plaster from. But again, it still takes quite a long time to dry out. So we actually started then using fabric. So the walls downstairs is a lot of fabric. It looks like wallpaper, but it's, obviously fabric. So it can dry from the inside out. So that was the
Clever,
process.
really
And then
clever.
I started using all this flame retardant fabric and going like, gosh, this is really quite nice. And then, the entrance to the utility room down there is this like pink folded fabric and it's very womb like. So yeah, so a lot of my design ideas or design inspirations either come from, going to like hotels or whatever or Instagram, but generally they're from like, how can we fix this fundamental problem through interiors? So
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I love the kind of really old-fashioned technology. I dug a French drain all the way around the house, and they'd obviously started to do it at one point and then just stopped. But then when there was damp, there was dry rot in the floor. It was just, and it's a concrete slab floor. There's actually dry rot running through the floor.
Wow.
It's insane, insane, and all because they didn't fix the gutters, and it was all about this big posh fancy house on the hill, but the fundamentals of looking after a building of this age, of any building, about letting the fabric breathe, letting it, all work as a system, were
Mhm.
completely ignored.
Yeah, when we were looking for a house to buy, actually, we were in the wilds of Wales, and we actually put an offer in on the property at one point. And I've got a really good friend of mine. He's a very good building surveyor, friend of my dad's. And we just said, look, can you do us mates rates on a full survey? Because this place was like 1800s, I think. And he phoned us up on the way out and basically just kind of said to us, have you got about £80,000 in the bank? And I said, what do you mean, Nick? And he said, you're going to need it. You're going to literally going to have to rip out the entire inside of that property. And we were gutted because it was one of those lovely picture postcard 1800 farmhouses, little front door in the middle, four windows, two by twos each side of the front door, lovely little pitch roof, Welsh hills going off everywhere behind it. And they'd actually used trees as the beams in the attic.
Wow.
They had the original timbers supporting the roof. But he said the problem is they're all U-shaped now over time. You're going to have to take the roof off. You're going to have to do the works. And it was a real shame because it was a beautiful property. But it's like you say, it's making sure that the actual structure is performing the way that it should. It's really, really important. And going back to the Wales property that we put an offer in on originally, that was all lime mortar, and it was designed to obviously, stay wet or stay dry. So basically, in the winter, it absorbed all the moisture and it actually kept the house warmer, and then summer dried out and kept the house cooler.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, a lot of the mortar on the outside of the building had just been replaced with cement. So, it wasn't, and that's where there was areas, like you say, areas of damp and everything else.
Well, even that ugly house, lovely house, the last one I did with Channel 4, the black one that clad it all in black timber. It was a brick 1970s thing, and the extension that we did. Oh, sorry, it was a timber extension, but the original brick walls, we replaced that with lime render. So it's oh, what's it called? Limelight. So it's like a
Yes.
contemporary light, and I love it. It's absolutely brilliant because it's breathable. It goes on really,
Mhm.
really quick. It's not, hellish like original lime mortar when you need to kind of mix it with hair and blood
Yeah.
and all sorts of things. Um, but again, you're still kind of breathing. So it doesn't matter what age of house you have, it's that kind of getting that breathability, whether that's just inside or whether that kind of goes to the outside as well. But they really struggle with damp. And the thing that lime does, it's one of the best materials ever. I'm like mad about lime, hemp, all that kind of stuff, old fashioned, original technology and how you can
They
use that in a
work.
contemporary
That's
way.
the thing. They work.
Exactly. Yeah. So that, absorbs moisture, like you say, it's antifungal, all this kind of stuff. And just like the burning the timber, it treats it, it's
Mm.
antifungal, it won't do, and, it's just like,
Yeah.
it's a kind of no
But
brainer. And
burning the exterior timber, I think that's just fascinating.
yeah.
I
And it's,
I
it's
love.
so common now. But
Yeah.
when I did it, I mean, Jesus, it made the papers that like, the
Yeah.
people were
I
so
remember it. Yeah.
divided on it.
Yeah. Remember it well.
But now you can't move a black charred wood.
But yeah, it obviously you've had highs and lows on the project with, as you've quite rightly said about the guy taking pictures of the house and stuff and everything. Um, but I'm really glad to hear that it's obviously moving along. And like I said earlier, it's working on a property and refurbishing a property is very organic. It's a journey. It always is. And I think you've pretty much already explained, the highs and lows of that. Now, obviously, we're coming up to time on the podcast. I try and keep them to about an hour. So I've kind of got the last question for you, which is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, which one piece of advice would you give?
Stop crying. You're brilliant. Get back out there.
Excellent,
It's
excellent. No, that's a good one. I like that. I always ask that one just purely because it's always quite interesting to see how people reflect. For me, it would have been to have more confidence and be more prepared to assert myself, so to speak. I was one of these people at work who I wasn't a sheep. I didn't kind of go with the flow all the time. But also, there were times when I lacked confidence to do something that maybe if I'd done it slightly differently, I might have progressed further quicker, maybe along those lines. But at the end of the day, I've been running a successful business now for 21 years, and I'm obviously doing something right, and I don't know what that is as well, which is kind of weird. I just kind of do what I do, and treat people with obviously the respect that I hope they're going to give me. So it's been wonderful having you here on the podcast. It's for me, it's great to have somebody that I kind of see nationally on the television, so to speak, and meet the person. That's a really nice experience. But also, it's really nice to see how the inner workings go on and how your thought processes kick in. Because I love finding out how people tick and what their passions are and what they love. Because I think I find out more in a work environment when I talk to somebody about something that is completely unrelated to their work. It's like I mentioned Pete, the drone guy that I've known for years. We talk about guitars all the time. We don't talk about CAD. We don't talk about drones. It's like, oh, did you see that guitar that Van Halen were using or whatever kind of thing? It's all a bit like that. But yeah, obviously, thank you ever so much for coming along. And I'll thank you on behalf of me and the listeners. And I know you're really busy. And just have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend, and hopefully we'll cross paths again sometime soon.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been
No
a
worries.
joy.
No worries at all. Cheers, Laura. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Not Just CAD, the podcast that covers CAD, BIM, technology, and lots of other not just CAD stuff. Tune into the next podcast on all the usual outlets. You can also find Not Just CAD on Instagram and Threads, and you'll find me, Sean Bryant, over on LinkedIn and Facebook. Not Just CAD is the social media outlet of CAD FM Consultants. You can check out the Not Just CAD blog at www.cadfmconsult.com.